What's up, David? How are you doing, sir?
Hey, the hottie, doing good this morning.
Doing good, doing good. Is it still morning over there?
No, it's it's not. It's not.
Oh,
I don't know what I said that. Why I said that. It's not morning. It's
it's a,
it's afternoon, right?
it is afternoon. It's okay. The COVID-19 thing has us all going really, really crazy. So
Too much work. Too much work.
too much work, too much video time when you're locked into with beautiful bookcases like we have both have going on here. All you can do is just read. So but I think my bookcase is better than your bookcase. I'm just gonna go ahead and go with that.
I'm sure you have the better books.
Yeah, just the only difference is that you're actually reading your books and I'm not. I just do this for things like this, so everybody who is listening to us today would believe that we actually have something to say that comes from this vast knowledge of books and the Holy Spirit.
That's it.
That is it. Well, welcome, welcome, welcome
Thank you.
all over North America. My name is Dahadi Lewis, and this is Pastor David from La Chapelle Church, and we are excited to be hosting today's breakout about looking ahead. What questions should we be asking? I'm excited that you have joined us for this breakout, and let me just kind of frame out for you quickly what this is going to look like. The session is going to be about an hour long, and we're going to create some interaction all the way from the beginning. We want this to be an interactive time because when we talk about what questions should we be asking, like we want to know the questions that you are asking, because the questions that you are asking are good questions and we want to be able to get to those questions. So you can, if you are with us, you can submit a question at any time. You don't have to wait to the end. I know usually in workshops you say we'll save the questions to the end. We're actually going to have this whole time, and this whole time could be based upon your questions, your feedback, and your scenarios. And if that would be great for us, so that we're not just talking about things that you don't want to hear. We want to be able to hear from you, and so you can submit a question at any time, and we'll do our best to answer as time allows. And we're also excited about today's topic about looking ahead, right? And so as you look ahead, what are the questions that are naturally germinating within you? Because the reality is that in the midst of this church planting, in the midst of COVID-19, pastoring churches, there was no handbook for any of us. There was no seminary class. There's nothing. And so many of us, we're just trying to create those spaces that we can interact with one another to do that. And so there is a questions of menu or option in there that we can just want you to put into the chat, because you may already have questions already that have. So just please type your questions into the question box here in the webinar, and then as we'll just get to them here and there. So let's kind of jump in. And again, as you see on the slide, let's continue the conversation on hashtag SN Gathering. And so that's Twitter that you can do that. So David, I don't know about you, but I've been having a countdown. And my countdown has started on March the 14th. March the 14th was the day that I was forced to be a homeschool parent. That was the day that the school shut down because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And since that time, we have been in lockdown mode. So I think we're in either day 82 or 83 in terms of how many days that we're doing. And it's kind of like I've been naming it the Corona Chronicles. And I don't know, everybody probably has a different day and time once this starts, but that's the day that has been for me. And now we're in summer and we are just kind of moving forward. And instead of looking back, we wanted to take this time to look ahead. And, out of that this time has brought about some genuine curiosity, because if COVID-19 haven't taught any of us anything, what it has taught us is that we are not in control of a lot of things. We are not in control, and we are in need that, whenever you're not in control, that stirs up fear, and, and it causes you to plan. But the question is what are we planning about? What are the questions to be asking? Like, am I answering the right questions? And it seems like as soon as we try to answer one question, another question comes about. And, and for us in the United States, I don't know how much it's affecting you. There has been some recent questions that have come up for us. We are now in the midst of looting. We are in the midst of riots. We are in the midst of protesting as a reaction of police brutality, because of, all the things. And for us in the United States, there has been, like, today is the funeral for George Floyd. It was the beginning of the Ahmaud Arbery trial. And so like all of these reminders are like on us. And it's like, okay, at first I had this COVID-19 thing that I thought was the main thing that I had to wrestle with. And now I have this on top of it, systemic injustice, systemic racism. Like what questions are the right questions? You know, and before that, it was like, when do I get back? When do I launch my service? And it's just like all of these thoughts, all of these questions are coming on you. First, let's just start off there. Like, as a pastor, right? Share a little bit about your church and share kind of how have you been processing all of this and how has all this time been impacting you as a church?
I think we're impacted as much as you guys in the United States are. Um, Even all the racial tension right now you have in United States, we have not at the same level, of course, but we have some of them right now in Canada because those issues concern people, right? And for me, when COVID-19 hits, I didn't know, are we going to go back to normal quick or not? And in the last few weeks, we began to see like hope to go back to the old normal. And those events, those racial tensions pop up everywhere. And for me, it's kind of a reminder that maybe God is not that much uh, maybe God don't want us to go that quick back to normal.
No, I
um,
think that that's a great, yeah, I mean, that's a great point because the reality with that is like, I literally feel like, what are the people going to be talking about this time 100 years from now? And I really think that this is some like biblical times, you know, like we are going through literally a plague, like the Corona-19 virus and pandemic, as specifically in the United States, has taken, you know, over 100,000 lives, you know, and that number doesn't seem to be decreasing or declining anytime soon. So it has taken lives everywhere. I mean, last time I checked in Canada, it was over 5,000, you
yes,
know, lives that was in
7,000 now.
7,000. So the numbers are still rising. The numbers are still going up. And now you throw this. As soon as that was over, now we have this. You know, and I don't know if in Canada, but also there has now been a bug, literally, that was been underground for 17 years that has decided to come out in 2020, and we're only halfway through the year. You know, and so like when we're thinking about all of these things, it's like as soon as you get honing in on one question, there's another question. And you brought up the idea of this question about whether or not like opening up. Those seems like distant questions, but for some of us, they're real questions because like for some of us, we are in schools, right? And we are subject to school systems. So one of the questions that I even when I think about this is for you, what are like, because I think you worship in a school, correct?
Yes.
So, like, what are you doing? Because part of you are left subject to when the school is going to be reopening. So, when you think about the question as we look for the future of reopening, future of Sunday gathering, how are you processing that if the schools don't reopen, that impacts you both short term and long term as a church?
Of course, in Canada, the reality is that religious zonings are rare. Most cities don't allow new religious zonings. So we are restrained in terms of where can we meet. So if we cannot go back to gather in schools soon, or if we cannot ever go back in school to worship, what's going to happen? So this is probably the main question I'm asking myself since COVID-19 hits. What are we going to do if? Now, we don't hope that's going to happen, but if it's going to happen, what are we going to do? So I try to have multiple plans, multiple scenarios in my head, but I need to remind myself that it's more about a curious moment than a new plan or a new thing. I really believe that what God's want to do first in us in this season is to give us new heart,
Mhm.
because God could not God allow things to happen, and he's reminding us, don't go too soon to your normal and to your plan. Just hold on and listen to me and catch what I'm trying to tell you, and keep your heart in synchro with my heart right now. So
Yeah.
I think above all plans and strategies, that's the main thing.
I think that's really good. And David, and again, we're talking with David Portier, lead pastor of La Chapelle Church. And we are here wanting to answer your questions. We're asking, what are the questions that we should be asking in the midst of our time now? Please, please, please submit questions in the question chat, because we want to get to your questions. So in the question block, submit your questions. David, as you were mentioning that, one of the things that really stood out to me was God is trying to do something in our hearts. We're so quick to ask the question, okay, what do we got to do? What do we got to do? Like, what's the next step? I really think that we are constantly missing the moment. We've been talking about maximizing the moment. I think we are constantly missing the moment because most of us, we're either living in the past or living forward to the future. But very few of us are looking forward to being present today. And I think that's really important for us. Is like, what does it look like for us to be present for today? James chapter 1 actually talks a little bit about this idea of being present and even some wavering in our some critical times. It says, consider it great joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you experience various trials. And I think we can consider this a various trial. I think that global pandemics, racism, police brutality, riots, I think that we can consider that a trial. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so consider when you experience various trials, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance. Like, it produces endurance. And it says, let endurance have its full effect so that you may be mature and complete, lacking in nothing. I think this is really critical, because that word in the Greek is hypostasis. It's basically saying, tell us, allow yourself to remain under. Don't quickly ask for delivery, ask for understanding, ask for a gnosis, like an epignosis, ask for God's understanding, his knowledge in there. Because the text continues, it says, now, if any of you lacks wisdom, and let's just take the pure understanding of wisdom, meaning applied knowledge. If any of you are lacking, how do we apply the biblical principles, our biblical identity today? Let's take that wisdom and we should ask God. Let's go to God and ask him for wisdom. Lord, I read your scripture, I read your principles. How does this look for us today in the COVID-19 pandemic, in the midst of the global unrest, in the midst of riots, in the midst of police brutality? Like, what do I do? And it says, because God gives it all generously and ungrudgingly, and it will be given to you. But let him not ask without in faith, without doubting. For the doubter is like a double-minded man, right? And I think that this is really critical when we begin to think about the questions. And this is why we're saying, what questions are we asking? At some point, everybody who's listening, listen to this. At some point, we got to go from the questions that we think that are conjuring up from us, and we got to allow, so be so biblically minded that we got to be allowing what are the questions that Christ would be asking. Like, we got to let the scriptures to inform our questions, right? And being able to think through that. And so I just think that that's really, really important. So, but we want to hear from you. We want to hear from you. So we're going to go to Scott. And Scott, let us know, what is the first question that we have?
Yeah, so we got this question. How can we help the church and church staff be less Sunday-centric and become more lifestyle believers focused on ministering and worshiping every day?
I think that's a great question, David. I'll let you hit that, because one of that, when you think about that question, specifically you, that's a question that you're going to have to wrestle with, as we were talking about earlier, about not having Sunday school. Like, if you don't have school, that's going to be pretty hard for you to have Sunday gathering. So how do you mobilize your church if you can't have that large Sunday gathering?
I think that in the first week of COVID crisis, when it hits, everybody was trying to continue to exist as a church. So for many of us, it's like going online and put some content and some podcast and some everything you can do just to continue to exist as a church, to have a presence. But since we are now in the second phase that we cannot gather as big gatherings yet, we need to ask question. This question is really at the heart of what we are, this phase we are right now. We need to transit our staff because Sunday morning, it's time consuming, right? We have to admit this. It's time consuming. So now that we will have more time, how can we mobilize our staff and volunteers to be more in mission? That's one of the questions we ask ourselves. At first, some of our team was on the phone and do phone calls, and we called everybody, but after, when you called somebody 4 times, 5 times, they kind of feel that we're done. Okay. So now we try to create new way to think about what a church staff should do, not just church stuff, but also community stuff. So we're gonna go to another phase where our staff will begin to have to do, they will be required from their church to do community stuff, to be part of serving the community, being paid as a staff, because we want to move from the gathering to the community, and we're going to put more emphasis on serving the community and even if it means we do less church stuff.
That's really good. I think what you're saying is spot on. Like, we have to develop outwardly focus, our staff teams, our city group leaders, our missional leaders. Like, we have to develop them and look and point them externally, because what we found out is that we have been really good at event coordinating. We have been really good at creating a Sunday gathering and so now that we don't have a Sunday gathering, like, our church staff, our church members are like, what are we supposed to be doing? Well, how about we fulfill the Great Commission? How about we go and make disciples? How about we go external?
Because we don't want our staff anymore in the next years. We don't want our staff being so busy doing church stuff that they cannot be lights in their communities, and we don't want church to suck light out of our people, so that cannot be salt and light in their community. So we are thinking about how can we simplify some things, what is really important. And if I give you more time and you watch Netflix as a staff, this is bad. But if I can give you more time and you have more presence in your community to be hands and feet of Jesus and share more about Jesus, this is a good thing. So we're trying to recalibrate on this.
I think that's really good. One of the things that I'm trying to encourage leaders around, both my staff and my people around, is 3 things. Like, leverage this time to turn your leaders in 3 ways. Number 1 is that they need to be advocate leaders. They need to be advocate leaders. With all the racial intention and the racial injustice, we're talking about, we need reconcilers, right? In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, Christ says that he has given us the ministry of reconciliation, that he is reconciling all things to himself. So we need to create advocate leaders. How do we bring about, all those things that divide us? How do we bring that together? Specifically in the United States, we got the election coming up. We got racial tensions here. We got all these things and so many things that historically has divided, that in these next questions, we need to think about how are we raising up leaders that can be advocate. Number 2 is that we need to raise up missional leaders, right? He said he has given us the ability, right? He has called us to go and make disciples of all nations. And so in this time, what you're saying is how do we create greater presence in our community? I'm constantly asking, as I'm calling people, talking to leaders, I'm asking them 2 questions. The first question is, how are you doing? The second question is, how is your neighbor doing? Because what we're trying to ultimately say is that you need to know how your neighbor is doing, because this is more than just simply self-preservation. You need to be outwardly focused and reaching out to your neighbor, because that's the question that we need to be always asking. And it's a question that we're asking now. So how do we become advocate leaders, missional leaders? And the last one is repentant leaders. And repentant leaders, when Jesus first starts his ministry in Matthew chapter 4, he says, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. That his first call out to us is repent. Our problem is that we only see the word repent as repenting from the bad things that we do. But what he's saying is that we need to repent. We need to change the way. That's what repent is, to change. We need to change the way we see God and his kingdom. It's not about rules and religion. It's about cultivating relationship with God, with ourselves, with our neighbors, and bringing the glory of God to our people. And so we can use this time and questions that you guys are facing as leaders to that, like, how can I turn kind of in the, advocate leaders, missional leaders, and repentant leaders, like, and turn this back to the glory of God.
About this topic of making missional leaders, I think that's one of the key questions people are asking right now. How do I leverage this season to train my leaders to be more missional? And I think that's one of the questions we should ask ourselves. How can I leverage this time? Maybe this window will never comes back. So after the phase, we need to still exist as to have a church presence. Now we need to ask, how can we train our leaders effectively to be more missional and have a more mission mindset? And I think it starts from this. We got to train missional leaders if we are missional leaders.
Yes, that's good. Because you cannot give what you do not have.
That's right.
That's good.
And if church suck life out of us because we're working too much on the organization and not that much in the community and in people, we will never have missional leaders. We can have the best strategies we can imagine or not. We will never have missional leaders. The primary way to have them is to be one. And so we need to find ways to simplify, and we need also to ask God to, I think we need to meet step of faith. As a church, we will do some of those step of faith to say, okay, this guy is working too much, so we need to cut things on his portfolio, and we need to give him margin to be a light of the world in this world.
Yeah, and I think that's it. Like, and that's what you're talking about, this idea of presence, being the light of the world, being the salt of the earth. And that's really what the focus is that we have. I'm, again, here to talk with David Portier, pastor of La Chapelle. We want to answer your questions. So please put your questions into the comment or the chat bar, and we will get to your questions. All right, Scott, what other questions do you have?
All right, so we got a question from Paul. He's a white pastor in South Minneapolis, and he says his heart is broken by the misunderstanding, anger, and racial divide in his city. And as he talks with his brothers, his black and white pastors across the city, I'll summarize here, but he's really asking, how can he use his voice well in the conversation?
Yeah, that's really good. Dave, you want to take a first stab at that?
I will, but with diligently. I think we should first we should be more before being a voice. We need to listen. Yeah. And one of the danger is that we try to speak, but we haven't listened before. We need to listen to the trauma. Listen to the pain of people. Listen as a white person. Listen to what it means today to be a black person. What kind of trauma have you been through? So for me, if we don't listen well, we will not be able to empathize well, and our voice will not contribute to the healing and to the peace. We can have good intention, and our voice can add some gasoline on the fire, So for me, in the last few days, my posture is, okay, I want to listen, I want to learn. I don't know what it is. don't say I understand you. We cannot, as white people, understand. We will never understand what it is. So let's focus on listening, understanding, have empathy, and I think after that we will have a better understanding to what to say.
That's really good. No, I think that's a really good thing, and especially as in your listening, that it's causing you and driving you to action. Is that we have to get to the point where there is something to say, and being able to do that. One of the things, I mean, as a lot of times when I think about being called to action, and even kind of tying into what Pastor just said, is this: there's 4 stages that I always go through about going from where I am to where I need to be. The first stage is awareness, right? Where am I? And I'm just simply saying, where are we? And I'm asking the question, and that's what David is talking about. Is it's like seeking to understand before trying to be understood, like putting our listening ears on, right? So awareness. Then from there, if you listen, it's just like doing observation in your Bible, right? Then the interpretation comes, and the next stage is vision. So awareness, vision. Let God give a vision of what takes place, and that's when we allow him to go. We go to his word and say, okay, God, you have spoken. These are not new times, or like you have spoken about these situations somewhere in your Bible. So where can I go? So awareness, vision, and then you move to strategy. All right, how can I get there? So you go, where am I? Awareness, vision. Where does God want me to be? Strategy. How do we get there? Then you begin to put in some next steps to say, I can do this, do that. I can have this conversation. I can do whatever, live, but and then the last one is courage. And the courage is, what are the fears and obstacles that will keep me from doing it, right? So if I think about what are the fears and obstacles that will keep me from doing the things that I'm supposed to be doing in order to get to where God's want me to be based upon where I am. That's, I think, is a formula that anybody can lay in, regardless of what context, so that you can be a part of the problem, because God is looking for laborers. He says the harvest is plentiful, but it's the laborers that are few. Pray to the Lord of the harvest for more laborers. We are too quickly embracing a passive Christianity, right? Where we are just sitting back and we are like letting the world, the nonprofit, the government organizations speak, while the Christians sit back in passivity, not doing anything, right? God, like our gospel is a missional gospel. It is news that we are to take to the nations. And I think it's really important for us to understand that we have good news. That's the very essence of the gospel. Paul said, I become all things to all men that I might save some. I do it all for the sake of the gospel, that I might share in its blessings. So some of us, we got to get back to the gospel being a blessing that needs to be shared to other people. It is good news, guys, gals, people, pastors, planters. It is good news in the midst of a dark and dark world. So I just really want you guys to hit that. So, all right, I'll get off my soapbox. All right, Scott, next question.
All right, 2 somewhat related questions here. The first is from Howard. He asks, what strategic changes are you guys considering as you go forward? Not necessarily reopening logistics, but strategy. And then James asked, I'd love some wisdom on leading my leadership team to embrace new realities and even embrace change.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So basically, what are the strategies that you're considering as you go forward? And again, so like you kind of talked about it a couple of times, David, specifically about if schools don't open up. Let's just imagine, let's play that out. Schools are not opening up, all right? They're not opening up for another year. They're not opening up until a vaccine comes. So we could be a year away from you actually having schools. What are you doing in the next year?
For me, the next step I'm waiting for with great anticipation is that we will be allowed to meet in small groups in homes, because in Quebec right now we cannot. Okay, the only thing we can do is to have a gathering of 10 people outside. But with the weather we have here, it's really so. Our small groups are all online right now. I am waiting for this moment when the government will say, hey, you can gather in a home. Because at this moment, for me, it's going to be a tipping point in our strategy. Because I think that what we do as a church online right now, as a church, is good. I think that we need to continue this, and we need to keep it after COVID-19. And the way we do it, that we don't have a building. So at first we were kind of mad that we don't have the stage and the light and the camera to do it. And finally we find other ways to do that. And we realized that the way we had to find to do it was the way we had to do it. We didn't realize that at first. So what we're doing online, worship and teaching online, I think it's there to stay. And the moment we can reopen with our small groups in the homes, we gonna push and encourage our people. Don't be alone in your home on Sunday to watch church online. No, no, no. Gathered as a small group, gathered as a missional community, and invite a friend or a neighbor to have lunch with you, watch church online with you, and have discussions and prayer time after it. One of the paradigm that shifted for me is this: pre-COVID, if my paradigm was I need to bring people in the church building, and everything we do, the sermons online are additional to bring people here. But my new paradigm is this: if they have church online with a small group and they are in mission and they don't show up in the building on a Sunday, I will be okay with that. Not only okay, I will be happy with that if this group is in mission, not a cheap version of consumerism. You know, you're just alone in your living room and you just swipe from a church to another and you're not in mission and anything. But for me, post-COVID, if a family, a small group gather together and they are in mission and they invite non-Christians to have lunch and watch service with them online, I will not only be okay, I will say this is church.
Yeah,
This is
that's good.
church.
Yeah, I mean, like the ecclesia. That's what I hear you talking about. It's like, how do we maintain the gathering and waiting for the government? You know, and so you said in Quebec, like you guys are 10 and under right now, and outside.
Outside only. So in fact, missional communities don't gather right now. It's all Zoom.
So like, so have they created a phase plan for you out there in Canada?
Not yet. Not yet. We're not there yet.
So, and that's really a part that we all got to face with. There's so many different diverse contexts. So we got people in Philly and we got people in New York and California that's still under curfew. You know, but here in Georgia, we're open up and people are walking around like there's never been a pandemic. You know, and so it's just like everybody is so different. You know, one of the things that I would say, I told you guys earlier, there's 3 kind of leaders that we need to create. We talk about advocate leaders. We'll talk about missional leaders, and I'll talk about repentant leaders. I think a 4th one that I would put out there that kind of, you know, when in terms of strategy, and that it's not necessarily a change because we've been doing this at Blueprint, but it is emotionally healthy leaders. One of the things that the COVID-19 pandemic has brought is emotional instability. It has raised up anxiety, fear, anger. Like we talk about the domestic abuse that has taken place, the loneliness, all of those things. And if we are not teaching people how to be emotionally, spiritually, and emotionally healthy, we're missing a huge moment, because they're like, when you're not in control, God has debunked this idea that we are in control. And that brings a lot of fear in a lot of people. Like no one's in control. Like David said, like we don't know when we're coming back. We don't know if this is a month, 2 months, or a year. And so that's hard to kind of come to grips with that. And that can bring anxiety. That can bring about depression. So we got to be able to teach emotionally healthy people in this next season. So strategy wise, we do a lot of work at Blueprint that's addressing, you know, that aspect of it. So I think it's really, really important for us to do that. All right, remember, we got questions. You got questions, we got answers. We got questions, hopefully you got answers. We're just here talking and about what are the questions that we should be asking, you know, as we are in the midst of this season. We want to answer as many questions as possible. Keep putting them in the question menu, and then we will continue to answer them. All right, Scott, what's the next question?
All right, this one comes from Ed. He asks, I'm part of a local diverse network of pastors from all denominations. We're struggling to unite with action. What is Sin Network or NAM doing in and through churches to unite around the response to the racism and injustice we're seeing?
That's a really good question.
Go on this
Ed.
one.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we're doing for Sin Network is like one of the primary reasons why I became Southern Baptist and and I'm a part of Sin Network and the North American Mission Board is because I truly believe that we can do more together than apart, right? And being able to come together with other pastors and leaders around our network is a super exciting, being able to do that and having that built-in structure of churches that are cooperating together for the purpose of missions. What I love about and reading about Baptist history is I'll read stories of, there was a social need, like people were having disease and being impacted, and so what churches would do that they would get together and they would end up in a hospital with form. And that's why how many of our Baptist hospitals have started, that churches coming together to create a need. The question becomes is that how do we get even beyond? Because I really think that even as Southern Baptists or even Sin Network, that we gotta learn to be better at partnering with those that are not Southern Baptists, that are not Sin Network, that are in different networks. And what does that look like for us as a network to partnering with other networks as churches? Because this problem is greater than any one denomination or any one network. And so what does that look like for us to intentionally do that? I think a lot of times what we have to do is that we got to figure out what is the common problem that we are all trying to address. Ultimately, many times when we do these types of things, we're jockeying for who's going to have the loudest voice, instead of like all coming together and saying, what is the common problem? What's the common enemy that we're trying to address? For instance, like in our, I was sending my kids to a school that was a low performing school here in the city, a typical inner city kids school, low performance, Section 8, all of those things that was taking place. But it was in a gentrifying neighborhood. And so my thought was like, how do I partner with those that are in the community that may not even be believers in Jesus Christ, but have a thing, and so but have a desire. And what I recognize is that, hey, everybody wants a good school, right? Because one, for some people who are in a gentrifying community, it's partnering. A good school has all to do with their housing value, so they care because they're housing. But then for people that are going to school, like my kids and other kids that are actually going to that school, they care because it's their kids being educated. So what we did was like, how do we find something on neutral ground that we can all partner together for the common good? And so we went over and we took over PTA and we joined PTA. And then what ended up happening is that we were calling people to join PTA. And that's where we began to recapture the art of hospitality. And I was able to connect with people on a relational level. And what do we have in common? That we all wanted better schools. And I think as churches, that's what we have to do, is that we got to be able to see, instead of that's tearing down our denominational barriers or all these things, and say we have a better school. And so Sin Network, we have these things called city teams. In our city teams, we are intentionally getting churches together to dream about what does it look like for us to come together for the greater good of our city. And as we're forming those city teams, I'm encouraging our city teams to engage with other pastors and other leaders in their network, or even outside of the network, for the purpose of rebuilding the city for the glory of God. And so I really think that we need to do more and more of that. And I think that's even where we see some of the power of what we're seeing with all the protests, that you see men and women, black and white. You're even seeing people from other countries, people in Paris, and like in solidarity, showing the support that something matters, right? Something matters. And if we're going to say all lives matter, then we got to say, because all lives can't matter if Black lives don't matter. And so that means we all got to come together and prove that all lives matter by showing that Black lives matter, and we can't, and all of us got to stand for this. And so hopefully that gives a little bit of an answer to that. And by the way, with that being said, at Sin Network, this is what we're about. We are about making disciples. The mission still move forwards, maximizing the moment. And so what that looks like for us is that we see that we are in a time that is exposing the systemic injustices, the systemic racism, and it's exposing the division that we have. But the church should not be divided. It should be undivided. So a while back, I've done a thing with J.D. Greer, and I would just, it's called Undivided, and I would just recommend any of you in the church, when I talk about creating advocate leaders, that go and look at this book. Go look at this curriculum. It's free. It's a downloadable, undivided.net. You can look at it. That I also wrote a book called Advocates, and this is talking about how do we take on the posture of becoming advocates instead of just simply aggravators. And so we need to be able to do that. We're going to put that Undivided in the screen for you to see it. But Advocates and Undivided are just resources that you're able to use to go along with your church, to help build in these conversations about the things that divide us. Ultimately, what we're going to be doing in the coming weeks, specifically, we're August the 20th, we're going to be doing one of our regional gatherings, one of our gatherings. Our next virtual gathering is going to be about Undivided. And we're going to do a conference, a virtual conference. Our next virtual conference is going to be specifically about Undivided. So you need to go and register. And in that, we're going to be releasing Undivided Part 2. I don't know what it's right now, where the working title is Undivided More Than a Hashtag. That's the working title. And so I just really want to encourage you guys, that when we're talking about Sin Network, we are proactively trying to be an answer, because we really believe that if we're going to make disciples in North America, we have to address the issue of racism, classism, discriminationism. We got to call sin, and the things that divide us, whether we're in Canada or whether we're here in the States, are critical. And if we're not equipped with the tools to do that, then we're missing out a point for the glory of God to make disciples for His fame. So sign up for those things. Undivided, we're coming out with the curriculum. Go get the Undivided curriculum in the past, and we could just keep this moving. See, David, you can't tell me to go. You can't tell me to go, because then I just start talking, and then I just get hyped and I get revved up, and
Continue, brother, preach.
So now we can take the offering, and if all heads are clear, we can take offering. So anyway, so let's get back to Scott. Scott, what's the next question?
All right, next question comes from Vladimir in Canada, and he asks, how do you reach new immigrants? They come from all different countries. English may not be their primary language. So we need missionaries, he says, who speak the languages of immigrants other than English, languages like Persian, Chinese, Spanish, Russian. Where can he find missionaries like that?
That's good. David, I want you to answer this question, because even I know your first language is not actually English, even though your English is excellent, and so you deal with language differences and those things and some of the challenges there. How do you reach new immigrants, and what is some of your strategy?
For us, the way we try to reach them is our vision is really to serve the nonprofits in town. So we created a nonprofit called Love Montreal, that everything the church does that is serving the community, our compassion ministry related, everything we do it through this. So it's not the church that serve, it's Love Montreal that serve. But of course, most people in Love Montreal are from our church. But and the approach we try to have is to not do our own thing, our own programs and our own stuff. We really try to partner with the nonprofits in town. In our case, they're all non-Christians. They're not Christians organization. And we try to be our best friend and to serve where we can. And this has put us in contact with a diversity of people. And we try to reach them. We have in our church a big Hispanic community. So when people come, we have a lot of maybe they don't speak French yet or English yet, but we connect them with Spanish-speaking church. But some choose to come in our church because they want to learn French and they want to be connected and they want to be to learn how to live in French. So for us, it go through our presence in the nonprofit organization and serving the community everywhere.
That's really good. So your primary language in your church is French speaking, correct?
Yes. Yes.
And so in your services or how you are streaming online, how are you addressing the different language groups in that context?
Okay, everything is in French.
Okay.
French is a minority in Canada. You got about 7 million people French speaking in Canada for 36, I think, million English people. So French speaking people are a minority by themselves. So we try to target French speaking. That's our main focus. But God used us to reach some Hispanic people because some people want to learn French because French in Quebec is the majority of people, and they want to be included and learn how to live in French. So we don't have services in other language. We're connected with other churches in town that have services in Arabic, in Spanish, so we can connect those people in those church if they want. We don't have like a Hispanic ministry or something like that. We connect them in other churches, but we try to be there for those who want to learn French and be connected in French churches.
That's a great answer. Great answer. Scott, what's your next question?
Next question comes from Ansung, who asks, what sermon suggestions do you have for this time for our congregations?
That's really good. David, what are you guys going through currently?
Before the George Floyd murdered, we were in a sermon series called All Thing New, and we were looking at this theme of new things through the Bible. It's everywhere, like new heart, new mind, new name, new heaven, new earth. It's everywhere, and it was kind of it was right on with the season we were in. People are asking questions about their life, what's next for me, etc. So I think it was a really good sermon series, really on point, on time. Now we are focusing on the events that took place. So we shut down everything this Sunday. Everything is shut down. It's like the Black Tuesday, concept. We shut down everything. Even our worship this Sunday, we're gonna be maybe one song, and we're gonna focus on the issues right now. The way we're gonna do it is we don't have like those big experts on the subject. You interviewed TD Jakes, and you got somebody that can speak at this level. So what we decided to do, we're gonna gather as a group of friends, 3 of us, black and white, me and 2 white person, two black friends in our church, and we gotta record this, and we're gonna have a conversation, a heart-to-heart conversation on this issue, and we're gonna encourage our people after to say, you saw what we done here today. You need to have those conversations with your kids. You need to have those conversations with your neighbors, with the people, with the black people, because we need to listen, have empathy, to be able to speak something that will have a minimum sense of and minimum wisdom. So we're at this. We're focusing on the issues right now, and next we don't know, but when we know what's gonna be when we're gonna reopen. It's going to be a series on revival. When we reopen the church fully, it's a revival series for, I don't know, 2 months. I don't know.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, what I would just say for us is that, very similar. When we first started, we were walking through the book of Acts, and we kind of closed out that series. We was at the end of it. We closed out that series in Acts, but then we went to a topical series of just kind of addressing the needs, because things were coming out weekly. So we just did a topical study at the church. But then starting this past week, we did a series called Cry Out, or Our Outcry. And really, a lot of it came from the rioting. Martin Luther King Jr., which is, by the way, the birthplace of where the neighborhood in which I minister is, he said that a riot is the voice of the unheard. And so ultimately, we said, like, what does it look like for us to give our church a platform to be heard? Because a lot of times, the reason why minorities are rioting, because they feel like their voice is going unheard. Over and over again, we've been saying this, there's systemic injustice, but it's just like, this is happening in our neighborhoods all the time. But the problem is that only when we get everything on a video camera, everything has to be perfect, is when you listen. Only, and not even then when you listen, is when we start rioting. Now you start listening, and so we want to give people a platform. We want to give people a voice. And so we've actually are taking the next 5 weeks, and we're just literally with some of our elders, Titus 2 women, and we're just having honest conversations, very much like what you just said. And so I would just affirm that. The other thing that I would say, is this. This is an incredible time, pastors, leaders that are thinking about something, to reinforce your DNA. I'm not talking about just simply going over your core values. I'm talking about what are the things that you are what are the things that you are pounding the table for? Like, why are you doing the stuff that you do? What do you get angry about? Because angry just tells us what's matter. What are you passionate about? Like, and so that's for us. In August, we're going to be doing a series on that. And it's basically it's like our DNA, right? The DNA of our church, why we do what we do. And it's just kind of going back to just the core. And then another thing that we're going to be talking about is just what we've been talking about, is wisdom. Wisdom. Like, we need, like, in this time, people are looking for just simply real knowledge, like applied knowledge. They're looking for wisdom. So we're just going to go and we're going to walk through just some proverbs and just say, like, okay, what are some practical principles, practical wisdom that we can give to you as we are joining, as we end. So that's really kind of what we want, what we plan on doing. And so we're just really excited about that. So those are some options that you can be thinking about as a pastor. We got about 9 more minutes left, and so we're going to keep going. We're going to answer as many questions as we can. We'll try to keep our answers shorter to get to more questions that you guys have. All right, Scott.
All right, so we've had a few questions about evangelism, and one of them comes from Renato, who asks, during and after COVID-19, how can we prepare our church to reach unbelievers?
How do we prepare our churches to reach unbelievers? So he said during or after?
Yep, during and after COVID-19, how can we prepare our church to reach unbelievers?
One of the things that I would say, as David, as you begin to think about that, is specifically for us, we are giving our people very practical examples to do this. And I'll give you 2 examples. Number 1, there's been probably tens, hundreds to thousands of people who have visited you over the last 10 months, year, however long. One of the practical things that we did for our church is that we literally took all the guests, for some reason, who never connected to our church, and we gave them to our members and had them broken up. And it says, hey, why don't you reach out to them and say, hey, this is a hard time, hey, a hard season. We don't know if you're a part of a church or if you found a church. We know you visited, but we would love just to know, how can we be praying for you? And being able, so just reaching out to people that have visited your church, it's sort of like a warm contact, because they have somehow showed some type of interest, and if you save that information, give that to your people and say, go back, reach out to them, not just to simply get them to come to the church, but just to simply pray for them. How are you doing? Build with them, connect relationships. So that's one practical way that we're just giving people, and that's something that you can do on the phone. You can, it doesn't take anything, right? The other thing that we're talking about is literally telling people, hey, there's apps like House Party, the little different apps that you can go and do, like neighborhood, you can go in virtually, where you don't have to do, you can still social distance, virtual block parties. Use this app called House Party, and you can play games and you can do things, and it gives you an opportunity to get to know your neighbors if you haven't known them, and to get a chance to share. We are very kind of about how do we create a platform to be able to proclaim and to preach the gospel. And so those are 2 tangible ways that we have done that, in order to do it. And we just have people all the way from go feed the homeless, and because there's homeless out there that can't be sick, shut in. So we've had people who went out and fed the homeless. We've had people who take meals to some of the shut-ins, some of our elderly. Just finding different ways, because we have a lot of senior living homes in our neighborhood. So those are some practical things that we're doing as a church, mobilizing our people. David, what about you?
Love what you said. We're doing the same things. We called every visitor we had, every guest we had, we just called them, hey, it's COVID, how can we help you? We did all the stuff you said are really good stuff. I would say for us, basically, it goes back to shift the mindset of people that the church will do it.
Yeah.
The church have to do it.
Yeah.
And shift this mindset that we are agents of God. We don't wait for heaven to come. We don't wait to go to heaven. We are those agents God had appointed to bring heavens down here. So this is one of the topic one of the paradigm shift we're having at church right now, and we're trying to have this in staff and in our leaders and key leaders to that this message, this paradigm is not that we're waiting for heaven, is that heaven will come here, and we are agents of working on this to bring heaven down where we are, where our feet are. This is a sacred space, and God wants to bring heaven there. So we try to shift this, that the church will do, or the institution will do it, and that people will take responsibility that they are doing church when they are talking with their neighbor, and just say hi and just say how you doing. The question you said before, I think this is key, the Hadi. How are your neighbors does, not just how do you do, how your neighbors does. This is a real important question, and for us it goes back to this paradigm shift we try to have.
Yeah, that's good, because what in asking what we found, that that's both a qualitative and quantitative question. When we ask the question, how are you doing and how is your neighbor doing? That is like, it is like, we're not telling you exactly what you need to do, but we're saying that you need to be doing, and there's an expectation that we have. And I just think that is a really critical thing for us to be able to recognize, is that. But I think, David, to your point, we spend way too much time like treating the church like an orphanage versus treating it like a family. You know, the difference between an orphanage and a family is that an orphanage there's a client and there's a provider, right? There, you know, and then there's a service that's being given to you. And too many people are treating the church like an orphanage. And in orphanages, what you end up having is you have a couple of overworked caregivers and a bunch of undernourished and underserved children, right? And it perpetuates the passive Christianity, the consumeristic Christianity that we continually embrace. And that, I think, that is the problem that we have, because we treat the church like an orphanage. Now, orphanages are good causes. They're good reasons. And so we're rallying people around good causes, right? But they're expecting the entity, the church, if that is, to do the task for them, in a sense. You see, but a family is different. A family is that we all, it's a place where mutual responsibility is taking place. And I think that it is really important for us to begin to recognize that. You know, and so, like, and in closing, because obviously I said we was going to take short times, but we end up talking too long. I end up talking too long. But in closing, and I'll let you have the final word, I just want to say this. One of the questions that we should be asking, we need to be asking ourselves when it comes to this, we need to be asking, how do we, in this next season, and as we think about missional leaders, and as we think about these types of leaders, like, the question becomes is, how do we run our churches more like family businesses, family, than we do more like orphanages? Great causes are great, keep serving them, but don't allow that to be the primary thing, that we are the family of God. God is our Father, Jesus is our elder brother, and we are brothers and sisters in Christ. And we need to take our responsibility collectively to promote God's and his glory. And so, David, in the last minute or so, tell us give us words of wisdom, give us all that wisdom that you have stored up for us.
Oh man, I think I can just add one important question we should ask ourselves during this this season is this: what place the Sunday or the weekly gatherings gonna have in our church life post COVID? And what I mean by that is not just post when we're gonna gather again, post vaccine, okay? Like, go back to really normal. What the church gathering gonna look like? Is it gonna be a weekly, or is it gonna be something else? I don't have the answer, but I think this should be an important question every pastor, every planner should ask himself.
Well, that's good. Well, David, I appreciate you guys. Once again, we were with David Portier. He is pastor of La Chapelle. Again, continue the conversation. Hashtag SN Gathering. networkgatheringBreakout.com. Sign up, Undivided, download the curriculum, begin the conversation, create advocate leaders, missional leaders, repentant leaders, and emotionally healthy leaders. Asking the question is, what does it look like, not just now, but what does it look like even beyond, beyond the vaccine? Sin Network, pastors, planners all across the country, wives, everybody, we love you. We appreciate you. God bless you. And we will see you guys in the future at our next Sin Network gathering. Remember, Undivided, August the 20th. You can sign up now. We love you guys.